to satsang. So beautiful to be together, and of course just another reminder as we start to make sure that your phones are off or on silent. Allow yourself the time. If you know that your phone's going to be beeping or blinging or ringing or doing the things it does, then our mind goes there. And then we're not able to be fully present anywhere in life. So give yourself some time each day where you can just be there. It's so beautiful to drop into this space with you all each night. And we begin usually with the question that comes in from our global family, because we're joined by our family across the world who come from their homes, their rooms, their cars, wherever they may be in their world, but who are joining in with us. And we take typically a question that's come from them in advance that they send in on Facebook or YouTube, and then we open it to any questions that anyone here has. Which is more useful? Interesting. Which is more useful? Intelligence or wisdom? So one of the things that, if you come to satsang a lot or you watch a lot of them, you'll know about me, is I try not to spend a lot of time in semantic dictionary distinctions. Difference between this word and that word. And the reason for that is that it doesn't impact our lives much. The whole point of satsang is to bring us into the place of truth. That's what satsang means, in the association, in the presence of truth. This is your time to dive into the truth of you. And so I try to avoid too many semantic distinctions, but this one was interesting. Intelligence and wisdom, because obviously on a deep level, wisdom, of course, is much more important. Of course it's more important to be wise and have deep understanding that comes from wisdom than to just have kind of the mental prowess that we associate with intelligence. And yet, intelligence is that enables us to live according to our wisdom. There are people who are wise, but who may not necessarily be so intelligent, and then what you find is, sadly, they're not even living by their own wisdom. So they know deep things. They've got great wisdom within themselves. And yet, in their own lives, the choices that they make are not putting that wisdom into practice. And so I would actually say they're both important. The wisdom, we must have it. Who are we? Wisdom tells us, who are we? Why are we here? Is it really just to accumulate more and more money? More and more possessions, more and more titles, more and more followers on Facebook, more and more neighbors who are jealous of us? I mean, is that really the point? Wisdom enables us to realize, no. We're here. We're here to experience the truth of who we are. And wisdom knows that truth. Wisdom knows that who you are is not the physical body, not the title, the role, the career, the bank account, but that who you are is divine. So that's wisdom is the place in which truth is stored, you could say. So in satsang, we come into the association, the presence of truth. But then when you leave from here, what happens to that truth? Well, it gets stored, you could say, in your wisdom. If you experience and deeply become aware during this time of satsang, and don't allow yourself to get distracted, when you go, there will be a new wisdom within you. And then you may or may not implement it in your life. You may go back to old habits, old ways. You've got the wisdom. But intelligence is that says, hey, wait. We just talked about that in satsang. Oh, wait, I just had that awareness, that realization in satsang. I've got new wisdom. I don't have to act by these same habits. I don't have to be a slave to my emotions and ignorance. So the intelligence is that says, hey, wait. We've got some new wisdom here. New options, new opportunities. Intelligence says, let's try an alternative. I've done the screaming and yelling and slapping someone enough times. I've done the getting jealous and throwing a fit enough times. I've done the sacrifice, my health, my spiritual practice, my family, just to make more money or get ahead. I've done that. Let's try something else. And then intelligence is intelligent enough to draw upon your wisdom and make new decisions and new choices. So luckily, even though the questioner asked which is more important, luckily, they actually tend to travel together a lot of times, and they're both things that can be cultivated quite easily. So I would say make sure you cultivate both. The wisdom and then the intelligence to use the wisdom. Before taking any of the other questions that came in advance, I'm happy to open it up if anyone here has any questions. Yes. Namaste.
We have talked about love and caring. We always try to love our close ones, but due to some situation or there are times we are not able to stand with them or whenever they need it, at some positions. But they notice, as they possess human nature, they notice those times and remember those times.
When we weren't able to stand with them, they remember that, yes. Human nature.
Human nature.
Of course.
But it is getting started hard to each other. Because
yes.
In that relationship it will affect.
Of course.
How to deal with that thing.
Beautiful. So, yeah, we try to love our loved ones. We try to be good to our loved ones. But we all make mistakes. We're human. But then they, who are also human, tend to remember those mistakes, sometimes even more than they remember the non-mistakes. And they tend to hold grudges. And what do we do about that? Well, first of all, we try not to be one of those who makes the mistake of holding grudges. When other people harm us, and we know they didn't mean to. We know they didn't wake up in the morning and say, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to really hurt him today. I'm going to make his life miserable. We know they didn't do that. So when people hurt us, the first thing we do is we let go and forgive. We don't hold on to it. We understand they're trying their best. But even more than that, we understand our own heart and our own lives and our freedom to not be angry, our freedom to not hold a grudge, our freedom to not be stuck is much more important than somebody else's mistake. If we lose our freedom, we lose our joy, we lose our peace because someone else made a mistake, what we're saying is your mistake is more important than my freedom. So from our side, we don't hold grudges. We let it go. We let it go. We exhale, we let it go. Because we understand my own heart, my peace, my joy, my connection, my freedom is the most important thing. Everyone else has their own karmic packages, like we have our own karmic package. And in that karmic package, there's ignorance, and there's fear, and there's confusion, and there's desire, and there's anger, and there's all these things. And just like we know we sometimes act out of those, we realize, okay, other people are doing it. Now, it doesn't mean that we allow ourselves to be a doormat, because that's always the next question that comes, is kab tak? Right? If they keep making the same mistake over and over again, kab tak sahn kar lenge? And the answer to that is as long as you want the relationship. Forgiving, letting go, you're going to keep doing that as long as you want the relationship. There certainly may come times in which whatever someone is doing to you is so harmful, and they keep doing it over and over again. You know, when I think about domestic violence. Okay, so that's not something I would suggest that we just keep taking. There are situations where you realize, okay, somebody else, their pain, their anger, their grudge, their confusion is actually harming me to such an extent that I need to not be here. And then we make that choice. But as long as we are making the choice to stay, then you keep making the choice to forgive. But it doesn't make you a doormat. It's not that you're saying, whatever you want to do, I'm going to love and accept it all. What you're saying is, my peace and joy is not dependent on what you do. I may not enjoy what you do. I may not appreciate it. I may not love it. I may not think it's the right way. But I'm just not prepared to sacrifice my own joy and peace on the altar of your confusion or your anger. So it's not a doormat. It's actually a very strong being who is able to forgive and let go, forgive and let go, forgive and let go. So that's the first thing we do, is we model that. We also, of course, try to be as conscious as we possibly can, because the mistakes from our side that harm others, they come when we're not conscious. Now, what is it that removes our consciousness from the moment? When we get way too busy, when we get stressed, when we're distracted. So if you're micro-managing and multitasking 10, 15 different things at once, and a loved one asks you something and you're stressed out and you're not really paying attention, it's very likely that you're going to say something that isn't going to be necessarily the most loving and patient and compassionate thing. And so we make a commitment. I'm going to be conscious. I'm not going to get myself so stressed or so distracted that I'm not able to respond in love and compassion and patience to the people around me. Because just as my freedom is critical, so is my consciousness. And if I'm losing my consciousness, that's making me say things that later I say, well, though, it wasn't me. Pata nahi kya hua mujhko. Wasn't me. Well, the question, of course, then is, who was it? It wasn't your higher self, but it was your unconscious, distracted, or stressed self, or angry self, or drunk self, or whatever it may be that's causing you to do those things. And that's when we then make commitment, okay, I'm going to stop living in such a way that I say things that or do things that later on I have to say, "Jara maaf kijiyega, pata nahi kya hua mujhko." Let us be conscious so that we actually mean what we say. And we say what we mean. We don't have to say, "Oh, to wo to mera matlab yahi nahi tha. Mera matlab kuch aur tha." To jo matlab hai wahi kaho. Be conscious about it. And then, if still we've made mistakes and they're not ready to forgive, well, obviously the first thing to do is to try to get them to forgive. Apologize. Say you're sorry. And here's a beautiful lesson. Even if it's actually the other person's fault, say sorry anyway. It ends things so much quicker. People think, well, so then they're going to think I'm very weak. But actually they won't. People understand that the one who's got the ability to say sorry, who actually isn't at fault, but just to maintain peace, that person is actually the strong one. So say sorry. Do something loving for them. Try to make it up to them if you can. And if not, if they really are not ready to hear it, there's nothing you can do. And then you let that go. Sometimes trust takes a little while to rebuild. If you've betrayed someone's trust in a way, it tends to sometimes take a while to rebuild. So be patient. Give them space. Don't get frustrated with them. And just have faith that it'll come back. And just keep loving them. Beautiful. Are there any other questions? Yes.
So there are relationships, like you said, and I would like to know, how do we differentiate between, at this age, I just want to be connected to the people I love, and the genuine relationships. I don't want to be with the diplomatic and, that I have to just keep
Upward. Yes. Yes.
So how do you kind of work that? And there are situations sometimes that you have to. Right?
Yeah, of course.
So how do you manage the balance?
Beautiful. So she said at this age, I would say at any age. The relationships that are deep and are connected are far more valuable than the relationships that are just upar say. And as she was saying, but how do we find those? Well, you find the connected relationships by being someone who is open. If we are meeting people upar say, and we are just giving our own drama and our own stories. We've all got our identity stories. If we went around here and we took the next few hours and I had everybody, speak for 1 minute on who are you, you'd all have a story. We call it the elevator version. It's the 2 minute, you've got 2 minutes in an elevator with someone. What's the story about your life? You tell them. Who are you? If we're meeting someone at that level, then that's the level the relationship's going to be at. But if we meet people at a real level, for example, someone says to you, "Oh, nice to see you, kaise aap? How are you?" Now, what do most of us say? "Bahut badhiya." Now, that's great. It's wonderful to be positive. But surely there are times in our life that we don't actually feel bahut badhiya. Surely there are days in our life when something has happened, we're struggling with something. And if you actually can be honest, someone says, "How are you?" And I don't mean to the guy on the street, but I mean to someone who you feel like this could be a connected relationship. They say, "How are you?" And you say, "Well, I've really been struggling with this thing. Or this happened, and it's really caused me to be a little bit less badhiya than I usually am. And I'm looking for I'm looking for a way of working with that. So it's not gossip. It's not, oh God, you will not believe what this guy did to me. It's not that. It's not complaining. But it's just actually being open and vulnerable. And then what you find is that in that, you create the space for other people to then be deeply connected. Our physical body connects to other people's physical body. Whether it's in a, sexual relationship, or whether you're playing tennis, or you're shaking hands, whatever it may be. Physical body connects with physical body. Intellectual mind connects with intellectual mind. You're having a discussion, you're having a debate, you're making plans. Soul connects to soul. And if your goal is to connect to someone at that level, or even if we're not yet ready to go all the way to the soul, to the heart, the deep heart, well, my heart is going to connect to your heart, which means that I have to be willing and courageous enough to actually show you my heart. Without shame, without telling little white lies to make things sound nicer, without worrying what you're going to think about me. I have to be prepared to show you my heart. Of course, knowing that you might betray me. There's always a risk. There's always a risk. But it's a necessary risk. Getting into your car is always a risk. You could always have an accident. There's lots of people who die in car accidents. But we get in our car. And if we're smart, we wear a seatbelt, we drive the speed limit, we do our best to stay safe. But we know there's a risk. But we do it because we have to go somewhere. If otherwise you're relegated to only going someplace you can walk, which of course is still a risk. You could still get hit by a car even if you're walking. So what's the option? Stay home. Well, that's a risk. There could be an earthquake. Your ceiling could fall on you. There could be a fire. So life is a risk. But we have to decide, how much are we prepared to be paralyzed because we don't take a risk? So start to meet people heart to heart. Not everyone. Not necessarily. Eventually I would say everyone. But start slowly. Start with people you feel you can trust. And see whether you can take the relationship deeper. And you don't need 1 million of those connections. A handful of them. A couple. I mean, if you've got even 2, 3 relationships in your life, even one, where you can really, really be open, that's a beautiful blessing. But you have to try. You have to take that step. And of course, we all have to have these sort of upward relationships. And yet, what I would suggest is that some of them can be taken a step deeper. But we just have to be prepared to do it. There's a lot of dekanika in the culture, a lot of sort of showing ourselves. It's what leads us to tell lies that we don't even think of are lies, but that aren't true, so therefore they're lies. But if someone said, "आप झूठ बोल रहे," नहीं वो झूठ तो नहीं है, मैंने बस इसी तरह से बोला था कि थोड़ा सा और ठीक लगता है. तो अगर सच नहीं है तो झूठ है. No options. But we say it because to tell the truth makes us feel, we feel shameful, or we feel embarrassed, or we feel too vulnerable. And I'm not saying that you have to bare your soul and your entire family drama to the checkout clerk at the grocery store. There are times when just ekdam theek hai is a perfectly fine answer to how are you. But see how many of these relationships you can start taking deeper. A step at a time. Just see what happens. What happens if you actually answer honestly? What happens if you meet someone from really a place of honesty? What happens inside you and what happens inside the relationship? I mean, the worst case scenario is the person tells everyone, she's really struggling. ठीक है. Who isn't struggling? Fine, so people know you're human. Okay, they're also human. But chances are that's not going to happen. Typically people tend not to do that. But take that first step. And just start meeting the world, meeting yourself honestly. Because the truth is, if I'm telling everyone and myself कि मैं बहुत बढ़िया हूँ, when I'm not only am I missing the possibility of a deeper connection, but I'm also missing the opportunity to actually become बहुत बढ़िया. Because if I don't admit to myself that I'm struggling in some way, then I miss the opportunity to actually heal that and to grow and to really find that joy and peace. So if we showed less and actually lived more, we'd actually be a lot happier and our relationships would be a lot deeper. Yeah, of course.
Why is the whole world together suffering from corona? Why are we all going through this?
Why is the whole world suffering from corona, from COVID? Well, the truth is there's a lot more that the whole world is suffering from. And there's going to be a lot more as time goes on. This was, I think, really a lesson. Here we've been speaking about it from day one as a lesson. We've lived in these illusions of separation for so long. Oh, what's happening in central China? वो तो बहुत दूर है. वो तो मेरा काम तो नहीं है. ठीक है, खाने दो जो खाते हैं. खरीदने दो जो खरीद लेते हैं. And yet, what we realize is, जो वो खा रहे हैं, जो वो खरीद रहे हैं, what those people are eating and buying in some meat market in central China has rippled into every single home, every school, every business, every corner across the planet. And what it certainly has done is it has wiped out any illusion of separation from anyone who's actually paying attention. There is no way that today anyone paying any attention can say, oh yeah, we are separate. That which happens to them, hone do, it's not our responsibility. We now know, actually we are deeply connected. It's a matter of only a couple weeks. They start getting sick there, you can start counting down when it's going to hit your corner. And this is the truth of the world. Corona has come, from the beginning, Puja Swamiji was saying, Corona has come as an ambassador. As an ambassador of this truth. To really show us we are not separate. And hopefully by God's grace, what that's going to do. Because eventually Corona will go. As a pandemic. They say it's going to stay endemic. It'll kind of come up and down. It'll flare up like a bad flu season or whatever. But as a pandemic, it's going to go. It's already going. But after this, there's so much else that's there to wreak havoc on our lives. Global warming, lack of water. So much is happening. The environmental destruction, pollution. I mean, if you still think you're separate, show me the rich man's air in Delhi. right? The rich man is breathing the same air as the poor man. Fine, in his house he might have an air filter, but then you're back in the COVID lockdown. If the only way we can stay safe and healthy is to stay within the four walls of our own home, then we're neither safe nor healthy nor living. And so there is no rich man's air and poor man's air. Any more than there's a rich man's river and a poor man's river. Or rich man's soil and poor man's soil, or rich man's rain and poor man's rain. When our water is polluted, when our air is polluted, when the rain that comes down is bringing that pollution onto earth, onto our soil. Well, we're all eating the vegetables, we're all eating the fruit, we're all eating the grains, we're all drinking the water. It's affecting all of us.
But is it our bad karmas that...
Is it our bad karma? Is it the result of our ignorance? Yes. Now, the virus itself, maybe no. Meaning, if you consider people eating the sorts of things that they were eating in that meat market ignorant, then yes, it is. But is it our ignorance? No. I'm the pukka vegetarian, right? You don't get COVID from a cucumber. But the ignorance that we've had, A, of this illusion of separation, but B, on just basic policy levels. If you look at the amount of money that we pour into weapons, guns, missiles, bombs, compared to the amount of money that we pour into our healthcare system. Is it our fault that so many people died? Yeah. Because how many times do you really have to blow up the world? I mean, once you've got enough weapons to blow up the world once, even if the other guy has enough weapons to blow it up 50 times, you're still equal, because there's only one world. And yet this accrual of more and more weapons, of spending more and more money on our defense, assuming that security is that which comes from simply fighting people off your borders. Well, COVID has shown us security is a lot more than that. We need functional health care. Now, we also realize, when we're looking at pollution, by the way, even during COVID, many times more people died of air pollution than of COVID. I was actually just today looking at these statistics. About 500,000 people have died in India of COVID over the last 2 years. And about 2 million people die every year of air pollution. Right? So in the last 2 years, you've got, say, approximately 4 million people dying of air pollution. And about 500,000 dying of COVID. 400,000 something. So we're looking at, 9, 10 times as many people dying of air pollution. Is that our fault? Yeah. Why? Because our motto is more, 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 cheaper, cheaper, cheaper. Which means that the factories have to keep running, spewing their waste into the air, into the soil, into the groundwater. If we all took a pledge and we said, we will only buy things, whether it's shoes or clothes or handbags or a mobile phone, from companies that prove that they are non-polluting, from green companies. Well, that which isn't shutting them down with sanctions and laws and rules would shut them down with money. Suddenly, if no one was buying their goods, unless they cleaned up their waste, they would learn to clean up their waste for a purely economic reason. So the issue is, are we also culpable? Absolutely. Because we are engaging in patterns and behaviors and choices that are contributing to this. If we insisted that we wouldn't buy anything that was produced in a factory that lines Mother Ganga, whose waste goes into Ganga, Ganga would be clean. The sewage they're taking care of very well. Like, infrastructure is happening with that. Municipalities are slowly, by God's grace, work is underway. But factories are on. Why? Because we want the items. You go to a Save Ganga or Protect Ganga rally, look at what everybody's shoes are made of. Leather. Look what their handbags are made of. Leather. Look what their car seats are made of. Leather. Now, what's the single greatest polluter of the waters of Ganga? The tanneries. If everyone who attended Save Ganga conferences, or whoever liked or shared a post on Facebook about protecting Ganga, actually pledged not to buy anything from a company whose waste polluted Ganga, Ganga would get clean. So is it our bad karma? I don't think about things so much like that, because when you talk about it, that tends to imply rewards and punishments. We did something bad, now we're being punished. Instead, I think about it more like seeds and fruit. We have planted seeds of an economy that has forgotten the eco. An economy that is rooted in more, cheaper, cheaper, cheaper. And as the purchasers, as the consumers, as long as it's cheap, we're prepared to buy it. What corners that company is cutting? I mean, ask yourself very simply, are you prepared to only buy organic food? Costs a little more. Takes a little bit of extra time to actually find places where you can get it. But it's now available everywhere. Are you prepared to buy only organic food? Are you prepared to buy only organic cotton? The amount of pesticides and fertilizers and toxins that go in the soil and then into our groundwater and then into our rivers from agriculture is phenomenal. But no, we want the potatoes for, however much they go for kg, rather than a little bit extra that's organic. So yeah, it is our fault that our rivers are polluted. It is our fault that our groundwater is polluted. Because it's the law of supply and demand. That which we're demanding gets supplied. Are you prepared to buy only fair trade items? Meaning that they're produced by factories or companies that aren't polluting the earth, that aren't putting women and children in sweatshops, that aren't using child labor, that have got healthy working conditions. Again, usually a little bit more money. But if we insisted that the tea we buy, the coffee we buy, the chocolate we buy, the shampoo we buy is organic and fair trade, we'd make a huge dent on all of the farmers who are getting cancer and getting sick and their children have birth defects because of the chemicals, on the toxins in our groundwater and our rivers, on the pollution in our air. As people, we need to come together and say, I've got power here. I may not have political power, but that's okay. I've got financial power. Let us use our financial power. Your notes are votes. Really. What you spend your money on, you're voting for it, essentially. I'm supporting these types of companies, these types of industries, these types of practices. So, are we being punished? No. But are we responsible? Absolutely. And do we have the beautiful ability now to make different choices in the future? Absolutely. But we have to be prepared to do them rather than just waiting, finally everybody should get vaccinated and I can just go back to my life as normal. Because then it'll just be something else.
I had chosen three things from this, three questions. And I will say that there are two words, inspirations and dedications. If somebody is inspired, and from that inspirations is somebody is dedicated, and again, from
Beautiful.
your words, I will say that at that point, the person is down to earth. Person is saying sorry each and every time.
Beautiful.
And even though
But,
that person is don't like anything,
beautiful.
then at that time, what should we do?
Beautiful. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening, everyone. A beautiful morning and a beautiful afternoon to those of you joining us from all over the world. And really look forward to being together tomorrow and seeing you all again. Thank you. Beautiful.